The streets of Boston were ablaze with autumn colors, and the crisp morning and evening air signaled the deepening of the season. As the spire of St. Paul's Church cast its shadow in the twilight, Elizabeth Watson was completing her daily records in the hospital staff lounge. The aroma of warm coffee rising from her cup gently enveloped her tired body. "Elizabeth, thank you for working late again. The child with the fracture seems to have settled down and is sleeping peacefully now." As she looked up at her colleague's voice, streetlights were beginning to illuminate one by one outside the window. As head nurse of Boston General Hospital's emergency room, her days were always long. However, the deep trust from her patients made her efforts worthwhile. She was particularly skilled with pediatric patients. Even crying children would naturally forget their tears in the presence of Elizabeth's gentle smile. "Thank you. I've finished tomorrow's handover notes too." As she replied, Elizabeth glanced at her watch. She would be able to make it home before her husband James returned. Tonight's dinner would be pot roast, his favorite. If she started preparing it right after getting home, they should be able to enjoy a warm meal together. James, who worked as an investment bank manager, was an ideal husband who helped with housework between his busy schedule and always drove Elizabeth to and from church on weekends. Married for 3 years without children, their life together seemed the very picture of happiness. His thoughtfulness in always preparing bagels and cream cheese for breakfast on holidays was the envy of the neighborhood wives. In particular, his close relationship with his sister Rachel was well known in the community. Successful as a luxury real estate agent, she possessed both beauty and intelligence, leading a fulfilling life. She visited her brother and sister-in-law's home 2 or 3 times a week, and was as close to Elizabeth as a real sister. On holidays, the three would often visit the local farmers' market together to select ingredients for dinner. Rachel's presence added color to Elizabeth's life. She would drop by unexpectedly after work, cheerfully sharing the latest gossip, and sometimes seeking advice about her work. Although Elizabeth secretly worried about Rachel's apparent decision to remain single, she never pressed her for the reason. "Oh, Elizabeth. Working late again. It's getting quite cold, isn't it?" As she finished her records and was about to leave the hospital, her mother-in-law Martha appeared at the emergency department. She regularly visited the hospital as a volunteer. For Elizabeth, she was both a good understanding friend and supporter. The way Martha lived strongly even after losing her husband was something Elizabeth deeply respected. "Yes, but I'm done for today. Martha, would you like to join us for dinner? I'm sure James would be delighted." "Thank you, dear, but I'll pass today. I have plans with Rachel. That child, she's been acting a bit strange lately, and as her mother, I'd like to talk with her." Martha showed a slightly worried expression but quickly returned to her gentle smile before leaving. Elizabeth once again realized how blessed she was with her family relationships. Indeed, even though they were in-laws, few people were fortunate enough to have such a warm family. James and Rachel lost their father shortly after their parents' divorce. The bond between the siblings, who had overcome difficult times together, was strong, sometimes enviably so. The family photographs in the picture frames. The smiles of the brother and sister captured their always conveyed an inexplicable intimacy. Elizabeth took pride in both of them. Taking the Red Line subway, she headed toward their house with its white picket fence in the quiet residential area of Brookline. Through the row of maple trees, she could see the lights on in their windows. The Halloween decorations at the entrance swayed gently in the autumn breeze. Elizabeth walked toward the entrance with light steps. Seeing Rachel's car parked outside, she thought they might have dinner for 3 tonight. The fluorescent lights of Boston General Hospital's emergency room cast their usual white glow. The night shift was unusually quiet, with few patients coming in for after-hours care. Elizabeth was methodically entering nursing records into the digitized medical record system. Next to her, Sarah, a new nurse, had begun preparing for the dawn handover. Outside the window, a cold autumn rain had begun to fall quietly. "Mrs. Watson, would you like some coffee?" The aroma of staff lounge pot coffee offered by Sarah slightly eased the midnight drowsiness. "Thank you. It's quiet tonight." The moment she said those words, the emergency radio crackled to life. Elizabeth closed her eyes for a moment. It was that ominous feeling familiar to anyone in emergency medicine. The fragmentary information coming through the radio made all staff members' expressions tighten. Emergency transport from a luxury hotel in the Harborfront district. A fall from an upper floor. 2 people unconscious. After a moment of silence, the entire emergency room began to show swift movement. Elizabeth's body responded instantly. "Sarah, prepare for 2 critical patients. Call Dr. John and Dr. Mark." Precise instructions flew one after another. The emergency department's night shift staff began their preparations at their respective stations, like a choreographed dance. Silent coordination among emergency care professionals. Monitors, infusion pumps, ventilators. All equipment stood ready for immediate use. Outside, the rain grew stronger, its sound against the windows echoing into the emergency room. Overlapping with that sound, the roar of sirens approached from the distance. Elizabeth unconsciously placed her hand on her chest. It should have been just another emergency transport. But tonight was different somehow. The automatic doors opened, letting in cold wind and rain. Emergency personnel rushed in pushing blood-soaked stretchers. That instant scene burned into Elizabeth's retina. The first person brought in was a man. Blood-stained blonde hair. A familiar navy suit. A wedding ring gleaming on his left ring finger. Elizabeth's world suddenly shifted into slow motion. The voices of the emergency personnel seemed distant, as if coming from underwater. The woman brought in next had long black hair stained with blood, her designer dress torn. A necklace at her throat. That profile was unmistakably Elizabeth. "This is..." Sarah was speechless. The 2 people brought into the trauma bay were her husband James and sister-in-law Rachel. The scent of an upscale hotel bar lingered on their rain-soaked bodies. Why are they?" Elizabeth's voice trembled. At that moment, Dr. Mark Smith, the emergency department chief, stood in front of her. The hem of his white coat brushed the blood-stained floor. "Elizabeth, you mustn't look. We'll explain after the police arrive." How long did it take to understand the meaning behind those words? Deep sympathy showed in Dr. Smith's eyes. Medical staff voices swirled around. The sound of 4 preparations. Monitor alarms. Emergency calls to the operating room. All sounds seemed to be coming from far away. Elizabeth stumbled backward. Her back hit the wall. Still, her eyes wouldn't leave the 2 figures. Their blood mixed on the floor, flowing like a red stream. "Elizabeth, let's go to the prayer room." Chaplain Father Michael gently placed his hand on her shoulder. The hem of his black robe crossed the stream of blood. "Prayer is all you can do right now." Father Michael quietly guided Elizabeth, whose steps were unsteady. Hospital staff had already begun gathering in the hallway, having caught wind of the rumors. Everyone was at a loss for words, just staring at Elizabeth. She was surrounded by gazes that could have been sympathy or suspicion. It was impossible to tell which. The prayer room door opened. A cross placed in the small room cast a long shadow on the wall. Outside the window, the rain grew increasingly intense. Elizabeth's knees gave way. Why were they at that luxury hotel? Outside the window, new ambulance sirens wailed. A night in the emergency room like any other. But Elizabeth's world had changed forever. The soft carpet silently absorbed her tears. Father Michael's words of prayer quietly filled the room. However, Elizabeth's life nightmare was just beginning. In the hospital's visitors' lounge, Elizabeth waited for police questioning. Father Michael sat quietly beside her. Outside the window, the eastern sky had begun to show a slight hint of dawn. 2 detectives entered. The older male detective addressed Elizabeth in a grave voice. "I'm David Morrison from Boston Police. This is my partner, Sarah Chen." Elizabeth's body began to tremble slightly. Father Michael gently held her hand. Are they alive?" "They're in surgery. Both are in critical condition, but they've survived." Elizabeth nodded slightly. Detective Chen spoke gently. "We received a report of a fall from the balcony of a suite on the 15th floor of the Intercontinental Hotel regarding your husband and sister-in-law. However," Detective Morrison continued, "based on security camera footage and the scene conditions, we've determined this wasn't an accident." Various thoughts swirled in Elizabeth's mind. Why were they at that hotel? Why late at night? Why from the balcony? "We've checked their smartphones. And we found this." Detective Chen took out a tablet and showed her photos. Elizabeth's eyes widened. Smartphone messaging app. From James to Rachel. "We can't continue this relationship anymore. I can't bear continuing to betray Elizabeth. Let's end everything." Rachel's reply. "I feel the same way. Let's end our love that no one could understand. But I want one last time together, just the 2 of us." After checking the hotel's reservation records, we discovered they had been regularly booking the same room for the past 3 months. Detective Morrison's voice seemed to come from far away. Empty sleeping pill packages and 2 suicide notes were found in the room. The detectives waited quietly. Various memories raced through Elizabeth's mind like a kaleidoscope. Rachel's smile during weekend brunches. The unfamiliar perfume lingering in the master bedroom. Her husband's increasingly late returns home. Rachel's words about never marrying. The strangely intimate photos of the siblings in the family album. We've received testimony from Martha Watson. Detective Chen continued quietly. According to their mother, this abnormal relationship began around the time of their parents' divorce 15 years ago. After their father's death, it developed into an even deeper dependence. The sound of rain grew stronger. The marriage was a facade, wasn't it? Elizabeth's voice was surprisingly calm. Yes. We found words of apology to you saved on James Watson's phone. He wrote that the marriage was to maintain social appearances. Did they attempt double suicide? We have to conclude that. After taking large doses of sleeping pills from the balcony, the security camera captured them holding hands as they jumped. Detective Morrison's words trailed off. We also found a confession scheduled to be posted on social media. It was set to auto-post at 9 a.m. this morning. Detective Chen operated the tablet. James's social media account. I apologize for ending years of lies and sins in this way. My sister Rachel and I have been trapped in a love that no one could understand. Elizabeth, I am truly sorry for involving you. When she finished reading the confession, Elizabeth quietly stood up. Outside the window, the dawn light had begun to faintly color the rain clouds. I must go to their rooms as their assigned nurse. I have a duty as head nurse to protect patients' lives. Her voice didn't tremble. Elizabeth, you are completely blameless. You bear no responsibility for their actions. Elizabeth nodded slightly at Detective Morrison's words. Thank you. But now, saving patients' lives takes priority. Elizabeth took a deep breath and left the lounge. Rumors had already begun circulating among hospital staff in the hallway. However, she walked toward the nurses' station with dignified steps. 1 week after the incident. The October sunlight streaming through the intensive care unit window felt strangely white. Elizabeth stood in the hallway in front of the hospital room, her hand on the doorknob, unable to move. Mrs. Watson, you don't need to force yourself. The voice from behind came from the ICU chief physician. No, I'm all right. I am this hospital's head nurse. Though she answered this way, her hand was trembling. For a week, she hadn't been able to enter the room. Days plagued by nausea and insomnia. Food wouldn't go down her throat, and her stomach wouldn't even accept coffee. Still, she came to work every day and carried out her regular duties. Elizabeth, let's go home today. Her colleague Sarah gently placed a hand on her shoulder. But Elizabeth shook her head. I need to check the nursing records. The records contained everything written in cool medical terms. Every time she read the charts, Elizabeth's chest tightened. Rumors had spread throughout the hospital. The gazes of colleagues passing in the hallway, conversations that suddenly stopped in the break room, an occasional whispered, "Poor thing," reaching her ears. A week ago, she had been this hospital's proud head nurse. She had earned deep trust from patients and respect from staff. Martha waited for her in the waiting room. James and Rachel's mother looked as if she had aged 10 years in a week. "Let me explain everything." Martha's voice contained deep exhaustion. 15 years ago, right after the divorce, I noticed. But I didn't want to acknowledge it. The abnormality of their relationship. The result of my continued denial. Elizabeth sat silently and listened to Martha's words. The family breakdown after the divorce. Their father's suicide. How the relationship between siblings who should have supported each other gradually became twisted. And then, the false marriage to maintain appearances. "I'm so sorry for involving you." Martha's tears fell to the waiting room floor. That night, Elizabeth visited the church for the first time. The usual Sunday worship place now felt strangely detached. The Lord gives us trials. But He never gives us trials we cannot endure. Father Michael's words quietly echoed through the church. "But Father, why would God?" The darkness in human hearts runs deep. Yet it is also the human heart that can shine light on that darkness. The setting sun streaming through the stained glass windows dyed Elizabeth's praying figure red at the altar. The next day, when she was about to submit a transfer request to the hospital's HR department, an unexpected event occurred. "Elizabeth, we have a request." All the emergency department staff had gathered before her. "We know you're not the type to run away. You've done nothing wrong. This department needs you. Let's get through this together." At her colleague's words, tears welled up in Elizabeth's eyes. The emotions she had desperately held back for a week were released all at once. That night, Elizabeth entered her husband's room for the first time. James, paralyzed from the waist down, turned his face away when he saw her. "I can't find the words to apologize." James's voice was hoarse. "Your apologies won't change anything." Elizabeth's voice was surprisingly calm. "I will fulfill my duties as a nurse. But this will be our last conversation." When she left the room, Elizabeth's back was straight. A patient she passed in the hallway smiled kindly at her. "Mrs. Watson, thanks to your nursing care, my wound has healed." Those words restored some warmth to Elizabeth's heart. On the weekend, Elizabeth went to look at a new apartment. Away from the Brookline district, closer to the hospital. From the windows, she could see the Charles River flowing. "How do you like this room?" the real estate agent asked. Elizabeth took a deep breath. New air filled her lungs. "I think I can start anew here." At dusk, while preparing to move, Elizabeth removed her wedding ring. A white mark remained where the ring had been. It would take time for that trace to disappear. But there was no need to rush. 1 year later in autumn. Children's laughter echoed through the pediatric emergency department corridor at Boston General Hospital. Mrs. Watson. A girl in a wheelchair waved at Elizabeth. She smiled gently and patted the girl's head. 1 year after transferring to the pediatric emergency department, Elizabeth's smile was gradually becoming genuine again. "Big sister, can I go home today?" "Yes, you've done very well." When she took candy from her white coat pocket, the girl's eyes sparkled. Her colleagues watched such scenes warmly. Since Mrs. Watson came, it seems the children are recovering faster. Dr. Michael Clark, the pediatrician, spoke kindly. He was a new doctor who had arrived 6 months ago, always maintaining a gentle smile. Sometimes he would offer Elizabeth coffee. The new apartment overlooking the Charles River had become Elizabeth's place of peace. On weekends, she had begun to enjoy buying fresh vegetables at the local farmer's market and cooking for herself. Sunday morning. Elizabeth still attended St. Paul's Church. However, she now participated in a different Mass time. Father Michael quietly observed her changes. "A new light has begun to dwell within you." On her way back from church, Martha called out to Elizabeth. Her relationship with her mother-in-law had actually grown deeper than before. Yes, little by little. The two entered a cafe near the church. From the window seat, they could see the Boston streets beginning to show their fall colors. "About James." Martha's voice trailed off. Elizabeth quietly picked up her coffee cup. After the incident a year ago, James's life had changed dramatically. With no prospect of recovery from his lower body paralysis and bankrupted by high medical costs, he was fired from the investment bank and now lived in a suburban care facility. Only Martha visited occasionally. Rachel's situation was even more serious. Diagnosed with severe mental illness, she was forced into long-term hospitalization in a psychiatric facility. Her real estate license was revoked, and she couldn't escape financial ruin from medical costs. They said she still called out her brother's name. "If only I had noticed earlier." "Martha, that wasn't your responsibility." Elizabeth gently held her mother-in-law's hand. "We must look forward and live on." Outside the cafe, the autumn sunlight was turning the street trees golden. Elizabeth's smartphone vibrated. A message from the hospital. "I'm sorry. An emergency patient." "Ah, that's the Elizabeth I know." Martha smiled with affection. On her way back to the hospital, Elizabeth looked up at the sky. Her life had changed dramatically since that rainy night a year ago. While she had lost much, she had also gained something. Entering the pediatric emergency department, she heard the usual sounds of children. Dr. Michael approached with documents in hand. "Mrs. Watson, if you're free this weekend." Elizabeth thought for a moment before nodding slightly. Perhaps it was time to start opening the door to a new life, little by little. At dusk, Elizabeth gazed at the sunset from the hospital window. The mark from her ring was now barely visible. Accept the past as the past, yet continue to face forward and live on. "Mrs. Watson." Hearing a child's voice from behind, Elizabeth turned around. Her profile, illuminated by the sunset, showed unmistakable strength. Tomorrow would bring another new day. And surely, new hope awaited beyond it. Outside the window, autumn winds gently rustled the street trees. Elizabeth took a deep breath and refilled the candy in her white coat pocket. Tonight, too, she would deliver her prescriptions of smiles.